Let me ask you a question, though. If your estate goes through probate, does it affect you personally?
I'm dead.
Correct. It doesn't affect you personally. It affects the people you leave behind. So you're not personally at risk for your estate going through probate. It's your family, your heirs, who have to go through that process and deal with all that aggravation. But there is an area in this world of estate planning where you are personally at risk for failing to engage in proper planning, failure to protect yourself. And it has to do with this notion. What happens if you get sick? I'm not talking about getting the flu. Okay? I'm talking about getting sick to the point where you can no longer manage your own financial affairs or direct your own health care. What happens if you become incompetent? You know, there's a roughly 50% chance that before we pass, we're going to cross the line where we're going to need help. We're going to need someone to manage our finances or someone to direct our health care because we can't fight our own battles. And so if you're alive and you're incompetent, someone needs to do this for you. And if you have no planning, if you have no preparation, don't worry. You're all signed up for a wonderful program in California we call Conservatorship. What's that? It's a probate proceeding. So we're back in probate court. So what's going on here? Because you have not taken steps to put in place a series of documents that say ahead of time, should I become incapable of managing my finances, here's who you look to take over for that. And should I be incapable of managing my health care and directing my own care, here's who's going to make these decisions for me. Because you have not done that, the only way someone can get the legal authority to act on your behalf to make those critical financial decisions and medical decisions is through this process called conservatorship. It's a probate proceeding. So what's going on here is you have now lost control of your destiny. There's a roughly 50% chance that you'll need help before you pass. And if you haven't put in place documentations to deal with that scenario, you're on the fast track for conservatorship should you become incapacitated. And it's a nightmare. So what goes on in the conservatorship proceeding? Well, a probate judge has to decide who to put in charge. Okay? And that person who will ultimately be put in charge of your affairs is going to be called your conservator. Now, people who are married in this room are probably saying, it's automatically to be my spouse. We're married, right? Remember Terry Schiavo? The woman who was in a coma in Florida for 15 years? In that situation, she had nothing in writing. And so her husband, who had long since remarried, fought against her parents over control of her health care. And because she had nothing in writing, they had to go to war over that issue. And there's Terry Schiavo cases going on all over the place. You just don't hear about them. And so it's not automatically going to be your spouse. These families fight over these issues. And there's two reasons. Control over the money or philosophical differences over end-of-life decision-making. So the judge has to decide who to put in charge. And a lot of times what happens is the judge feels that there's no real good candidate from the family. They'll appoint what they call a public guardian. This is a bureaucrat who is paid by the state of California to make life and death decisions for you and be in charge of your finances. I doubt anybody would want a bureaucrat in charge of their affairs if they got sick, right? It's a nightmare, yes.
Who declares you incompetent?
A judge has to. See, the order declaring you incompetent means that you're no longer able to protect yourself. And so once that order is issued, they have to put someone in charge, and that person is called your conservator. Okay? And so this happens because you haven't taken steps to put in place documents to avoid this outcome. And so this conservator is going to be in charge of everything you own. And when that happens, once you're declared, they take away your licensure. If you're a nurse, you're no longer a nurse. They even take away your driver's license. Because after all, we don't want incompetent people on the road driving, do we? Although, every day, I am reminded, there are so many holes in the system. There's tons of people out there who are incompetent. Now, this is litigation, okay? There's an expense associated with starting one of these things. You know, you got to get attorneys involved. You have to have doctors testify about your legal capacity. Accountants have to prepare reports. The statewide average to get one of these things going is roughly around $10,000. That's pretty expensive. And there's a difference between probate and conservatorship in that as long as you're alive and you're sick, once the court takes jurisdiction over your life, that conservator has to report back every single year and show the judge how the money is being spent. Because the judge, the court, is overseeing your estate now at this point. And so there's ongoing filing requirements. And we've seen conservatorships go 7 or more years in the case of Alzheimer's disease. We call that the long goodbye. And what ends up happening is when that person eventually passes on, if there's anything left in their estate, whatever's left is going to go through probate. So the cost of conservatorship can end up exceeding your page 10 calculations for probate. So it's a nightmare. Okay, this is an absolute nightmare because it's something that can easily be avoided with proper planning. If you just exercise your rights to opt out. But if you fail to do so, you're lined up for this horrible experience where your family, when you need them to be in a position to protect you, has to go to court to get the legal authority to do so. So we don't want to put ourselves at risk. This is why I think this is worse than probate, because this is where we're vulnerable.